Officer Frank Miller drove his police car slowly along the outer roads of New Washington Colony. The hum of the car's engine was the only sound in the quiet afternoon. New Washington was the third biggest human settlement in the Orion sector of space. Humans had only been able to travel faster than light for 50 years, but they had built many colonies in that time. Frank had worked for the New Washington Police Department for 15 years. He thought he was good at finding trouble before it started. He liked to tell the younger officers that he could smell a criminal from a mile away. Many of his fellow officers knew that Frank often judged people too quickly, especially if they weren't white, but no one ever said anything about it. The computer in his car made a beeping noise. It showed a vehicle stopped on the side of the road in Sector 7. This area was where the well-kept colony buildings ended and the newly changed wilderness began. Not many people went out there unless they were up to no good. Frank turned his car toward the alert. As he got closer, he could see a black man kneeling beside a stopped hover car. The man was working on an open panel on the side of the vehicle. Frank noticed right away that the car was very expensive and had government markings. His eyes narrowed. Why would a man in plain clothes be messing with a government car out here, far from the main offices? Dispatch. I think I found someone trying to steal a car, Frank said into his radio. He didn't wait for the person at the station to answer before turning on his flashing lights. The man by the car looked up as Frank's police vehicle stopped behind him. The man's hands were dirty with black grease from the car engine. He stood up slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. Put your hands where I can see them, Frank shouted as he got out of his car. His hand moved close to his electric stun gun. Officer, I'm just changing a... The man began to explain. His voice was calm and he spoke clearly. I said, put your hands up, step away from the vehicle. Frank cut him off. In Frank's mind, this was just another criminal trying to steal expensive government technology. He had caught people doing similar things before, and they were almost always smugglers or thieves. There's a misunderstanding. The man tried to speak again, still calm. There's no misunderstanding. You're under arrest for trying to steal government property, Frank said. He pulled out his handcuffs. The man sighed deeply but did as he was told. He raised his hand slowly. My ID cards are in my pocket, he said. Frank ignored this. He roughly pulled the man's hands behind his back and put the handcuffs on. He did not notice the small pin on the man's shirt collar. It was the mark of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, made to be hard to see when diplomats were on alien worlds. My name is Dr. Aaron Washington, the man said, as Frank pushed him toward the police car. I am the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. Frank laughed. Yeah, right, and I'm the president of Earth. Frank pushed Dr. Washington into the back seat of his police car. He felt proud of himself for catching what he thought was a thief. He got in the driver's seat and headed back to the police station. You picked the wrong car to mess with, Frank said, looking at the man in his mirror. Those government vehicles have tracking devices and alarms. Did you think no one would notice? Dr. Washington looked out the window calmly. The tracking system is why I was there, officer. It had a fault. I was fixing it. Save it for the judge, Frank said. They've heard all the stories before. As they drove through the colony, they passed several aliens walking among the humans. New Washington was known for having good relations with many alien species. Frank never liked this. He thought Earth and its colonies should focus on human problems, not alien ones. Do you know why New Washington was chosen as a site for diplomatic meetings? Dr. Washington asked suddenly. I don't care, Frank replied. Because this colony has shown that humans can live peacefully with other species, Dr. Washington continued, as if Frank had not spoken. The Galactic Council watches how we treat each other to judge how we might treat them. Frank rolled his eyes. Are you going to keep up this ambassador act the whole way? Dr. Washington fell silent. When they arrived at the police station, Frank led Dr. Washington through the front doors with a smug smile on his face. Several other police officers looked up from their desks. Some of them seemed confused when they saw who Frank was bringing in. Miller, who did you arrest? Asked Officer Sam Kelly, giving Dr. Washington a strange look. Caught him messing with a government car out in Sector 7, Frank said proudly. Says he's some kind of ambassador. Officer Kelly's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth to say something, But just then, the station chief's door opened. Captain Laura Bennett walked out of her office. Her face turned pale when she saw Dr. Washington in handcuffs. "Miller, take those cuffs off him right now." "But Captain, I caught him." "Now, Miller." Captain Bennett's voice was sharp and angry. Frank slowly took the handcuffs off Dr. Washington, feeling confused. Just then, the station doors opened. 3 people in formal Terran Diplomatic Corps uniforms walked in. They had 2 security officers with them. The security officers had the special mark of Earth's highest security force. "Dr. Washington, are you okay?" asked one of the diplomats, a woman with gray hair who looked very important. "I'm fine, Patricia," Dr. Washington said, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had been. "Just a mix-up." Captain Bennett stepped forward. Quickly. "Ambassador Washington, I am so sorry about this. Please accept my apology for our department." Frank felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He really looked, at the man he had arrested. Now he recognized the face he had seen many times on the news. Dr. Aaron Washington was Earth's top diplomat. He spoke for all humans, to the Galactic Council. He was largely responsible for humans being accepted so quickly by older alien civilizations. "Captain," Dr. Washington said calmly, "I would like to talk with Officer Miller in private before I have to go to my meeting with the Arcturus delegation." Frank felt cold sweat on his back. He had really messed up this time. Captain Bennett led Frank and Dr. Washington to her office. Frank walked stiffly, feeling the stares of every officer in the room on his back. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded very loud to Frank's ears. "Sit down, Miller," Captain Bennett said in a tight voice. Frank sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Dr. Washington took the other chair, looking calm. "Ambassador Washington, I cannot tell you how sorry I am for this incident," Captain Bennett said. Her face was still pale and Frank could see small beads of sweat on her forehead. "It's all right, Captain," Dr. Washington said. "As I said, it was a misunderstanding." "A serious one," Captain Bennett replied. She turned to Frank. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Miller?" Frank stared at the floor. "I thought he was trying to steal the car." "Based on what evidence?" Captain Bennett asked sharply. Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no good answer. He had seen a black man working on an expensive government car and jumped to a conclusion. Dr. Washington leaned forward in his chair. "Captain, if I may speak with Officer Miller alone?" Captain Bennett looked surprised. "Of course, Ambassador. I'll be right outside if you need anything." She gave Frank a hard look before leaving the office. When the door closed, Frank and Dr. Washington sat in silence for a long moment. Frank could not bring himself to look at the man he had wrongly arrested. "Officer Miller, do you know why I'm here on New Washington Colony?" Dr. Washington finally asked. "No, sir," Frank replied stiffly, eyes still on the floor. "I'm here because this colony is being considered for the new Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center," Dr. Washington explained. "The Galactic Council sees promise in how humans and aliens live together here." He paused. "Or at least they did." Frank swallowed hard. He forced himself to look up. "Will this incident change that?" "It might," Dr. Washington said honestly. "The aliens we share the galaxy with have been watching humans closely since we joined the interstellar community. They know our history, the good and the bad. They know about wars, about slavery, about prejudice. They worry these traits will follow us to the stars." Dr. Washington stood up and walked to the window. Through it, they could see the main street of the colony where humans walked alongside various alien beings. The tall, thin Proxima who moved like dancers, the heavy-set, scaled Rigelians, the floating, jellyfish-like Taucedians. "I've worked for 20 years to show them that humanity has moved past its worst impulses," Dr. Washington continued. "Today you made my job harder." Frank felt shame wash over him like a wave. "What happens now, sir? Will I lose my job?" Dr. Washington turned back from the window. "That's not up to me. But I'm not interested in ending your career, Officer Miller. I'm more interested in changing your thinking." Before Frank could respond, there was a knock at the door. Captain Bennett entered with a worried look on her face. "Ambassador, the Arcturus delegation has arrived early. They're asking for you. Dr. Washington nodded. I'll be right there. He turned back to Frank. We're not finished, Officer Miller. Report to the Diplomatic Center tomorrow at 0800 hours. With that, Dr. Washington left the office. Captain Bennett closed the door and turned to Frank with an angry expression. I should fire you right now, she said. Yes, ma'am, Frank agreed quietly. Captain Bennett sat behind her desk and rubbed her temples. Do you know who Dr. Washington is, beyond his title? He's the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, Frank said. He's more than that, Captain Bennett replied. He's the reason humans were accepted into the Galactic Council so quickly. Most species wait decades, sometimes centuries. We were accepted in less than 5 years, largely because of his work. Frank hadn't known that. He'd never paid much attention to diplomacy or alien affairs. The Arcturus delegation he mentioned is here to decide if New Washington gets the new Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center. Captain Bennett continued. Do you know what that would mean for our colony? Frank shook his head. Economic growth, scientific advancement, cultural prestige, thousands of new jobs. Captain Bennett leaned forward. And you may have just ruined our chances because you saw a black man near an expensive car and assumed he was a criminal. The words hit Frank like physical blows. He had no defense. I'm suspending you for 1 week without pay, Captain Bennett said. And you will report to the Diplomatic Center tomorrow as the ambassador requested. If you don't bother coming back at all. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Frank said. The next morning, Frank arrived at the Diplomatic Center at exactly 800 hours. The building was impressive. A tall structure with a design that combined human architecture with alien influences. The glass walls reflected the morning sun, making the building shine like a beacon. Inside, various beings moved through the lobby. Frank had never been this close to so many aliens before. He felt uncomfortable and out of place without his uniform. A young woman approached him. Officer Miller, I'm Elaine Rodriguez, Dr. Washington's assistant. Please follow me. She led Frank through security and up to the top floor. The elevator walls were clear, giving them a view of the colony as they rose. Higher, Frank could see how the human buildings blended with alien structures, creating a unique skyline that symbolized cooperation. Dr. Washington's office was large but simple. One wall was lined with strange objects, gifts from alien delegations. Frank guessed. Dr. Washington sat behind a desk made of a material Frank didn't recognize. It seemed to glow faintly from within. Thank you for coming, Officer Miller, Dr. Washington said. Please sit down. Frank sat in the offered chair. Sir, I want to apologize for yesterday. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did, Dr. Washington agreed. But as I said, I'm not interested in punishing you. I'm interested in educating you. He pressed a button on his desk, which is why I've arranged something special. The door opened, and a tall being entered the room. It had iridescent blue-green scales, 4 arms, and eyes that seemed to change color as it moved. Frank recognized it as an Arcturian, one of the oldest and most respected species in the Galactic Council. Officer Miller, meet Ambassador Zakthar of the Arcturus Federation, Dr. Washington said. Frank stood up quickly, his heart racing. He had never been this close to such an important alien before. Ambassador Zakthar, this is Officer Frank Miller of the New Washington Police, Dr. Washington continued. He will be your security liaison during your stay on our colony. Frank's eyes widened in shock. This was not what he had expected. Frank stood frozen in place, staring at the Arcturian ambassador. He didn't know what to say. Ambassador Zakthar was over 7 feet tall with shimmering scales that changed colors slightly as the alien moved. The ambassador had 4 arms and large eyes that seemed to look right through Frank. It is a pleasure to meet you, Officer Miller, Ambassador Zakthar said. The alien's voice was surprisingly gentle, with a musical quality that reminded Frank of flowing water. Dr. Washington speaks highly of your abilities. Frank shot a quick, confused look at Dr. Washington, who gave him a small nod. Thank you, Ambassador, Frank managed to say. It's an honor to meet you. Dr. Washington stood up from his desk. Ambassador Zakathar and the Arcturus delegation will be touring our colony for the next 2 weeks. They are here to evaluate New Washington as the potential site for the new Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center. Frank nodded, still trying to understand why he had been chosen for this assignment. The ambassador requested our best security officer, Dr. Washington continued, giving Frank a meaningful look. Someone who understands the importance of protecting all beings, regardless of their appearance or origin. Frank understood now. This was his test, and his chance to make things right. "I won't let you down, sir," Frank said, trying to sound confident despite the nervousness he felt. Ambassador Zakathar made a gesture with 2 of his 4 hands. "On my world, we believe that challenges reveal true character. Dr. Washington has told me of yesterday's incident. I'm curious to see your character, Officer Miller." Frank felt his face grow hot with shame. Even the aliens knew about his mistake. Dr. Washington walked around his desk. "The delegation's tour begins in 1 hour. You'll need this." He handed Frank a small device. "It's a universal translator. Ambassador Zakathar speaks English well, but some members of the delegation do not." Frank took the device and clipped it to his collar. "Thank you, sir. One more thing," Dr. Washington added, his voice becoming serious. "The Arcturians have a special ability. They can sense human emotions through changes in the chemicals we release into the air. They will know if you fear them, if you dislike them. They will know your true feelings no matter what you say." Frank felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at Ambassador Zakathar, who was watching him with those color-changing eyes. "I understand," Frank said quietly. An hour later, Frank stood at the entrance of the diplomatic center, waiting for the Arcturus delegation. His mind was racing with thoughts about the task ahead. He had never been comfortable around aliens. He had always kept his distance from the non-human residents of the colony. Now he would be spending 2 weeks in close contact with them. A large transport vehicle pulled up to the entrance. The doors opened, and 6 Arcturians stepped out. Ambassador Zakathar was at the front, with 5 others behind. They varied in size and scale color, but all had the same basic shape with 4 arms and tall, lean bodies. Frank stepped forward. "Welcome to New Washington Colony. I'm Officer Frank Miller, and I'll be in charge of your security during your stay." Ambassador Zakathar made a gesture that Frank guessed was a greeting. "Thank you, Officer Miller. May I introduce my colleagues?" The other Arcturians came forward one by one. There was Science Minister Verzal, Cultural Attaché Therine, Security, Chief Creval, Economic Advisor Pylorn, and Junior Diplomat Max Ta. Frank tried to memorize their names and positions, but they were hard to pronounce and remember. As the group walked toward the waiting ground car, Frank noticed people on the street stopping to stare at the aliens. Most looked curious or interested, but some showed fear or dislike on their faces. Frank wondered if his own face had shown the same expressions in the past. The first stop on the tour was the colony's main market. It was a busy place where humans and aliens traded goods from across the galaxy. The Arcturians seemed interested in how different species interacted in the market. "Your people and the Rigelians appear to work well together," Ambassador Zakathar commented to Frank. "Yes, sir," Frank replied. "The Rigelians have been good trading partners. They bring metals we need, and we provide them with food they can't grow on their homeworld." Frank was surprised to find himself relaxing a little as the tour continued. The Arcturians asked thoughtful questions, and he did his best to answer them honestly. When he didn't know something, he would call over a local expert to explain. By midday, they had visited the market, a school, and a medical center. They stopped for lunch at a restaurant that served food suitable for both humans and Arcturians. Frank sat with Junior Diplomat Mexta, the youngest member of the delegation. "You seem uncomfortable around us, Officer Miller," Mexta said bluntly. Frank hesitated, then remembered they could sense his emotions anyway. "Yes, I am. I haven't spent much time with aliens, with other species before." Mexta's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Yet you were chosen as our guide." "It's a long story," Frank said. "We Arcturians enjoy long stories," Mexta replied. So Frank told the young diplomat about the incident with Dr. Washington. He explained how he had made a wrong judgment based on old prejudices, and how this assignment was both his punishment and his chance to learn. Interesting, Mexta said when Frank finished. On our world, we do not judge by appearance but by the chemical signals beings emit. Humans give off different signals when they lie or when they tell the truth, different signals when they hate or when they care. That must make things simpler, Frank said. Mexta made a gesture that Frank didn't understand. Not simpler, different. We have our own problems, our own prejudices. For instance, many of my people believe humans are too young a species to join the Galactic Council. They say you have not had enough time to grow past your violent nature. Frank was surprised by this honesty. What do you think? I think, Mexta said slowly, that any species can change, given the right reasons. After lunch, the tour continued to the industrial sector of the colony. As they walked through a manufacturing plant, Frank noticed a worker glaring at the Arcturians. The man's face showed clear dislike. Frank moved slightly to place himself between the worker and the delegation. Ambassador Zuckathar noticed. Not all your people welcome us, it seems. Frank nodded. Some humans are afraid of differences. Some don't like change. It doesn't make it right, but it's the truth. Honesty, Ambassador Zuckathar said. That is a good start, Officer Miller. A very good start indeed. The first week of the Arcturus delegation's visit passed quickly. Each day, Frank led the aliens to different parts of the colony. They visited farms where Earth plants grew alongside alien crops, factories where humans and aliens worked together, and schools where children learned about many different worlds. Frank was surprised at how much he was learning himself. On the 8th day, Frank arrived at the hotel where the Arcturians were staying. Security Chief Creval was waiting for him in the lobby. The alien's scales were a darker blue than usual, which Frank had learned meant concern. Is something wrong? Frank asked. Ambassador Zuckathar received a message during the night. Creval said. There have been threats made against our delegation. Frank frowned. What kind of threats? A human group that calls itself Earth First has promised to stop the exchange center from being built here, Creval explained. They say keeping aliens out of New Washington is their goal. Frank felt anger rise inside him. He knew about Earth First. It was a small but loud group that believed humans should not mix with alien species. In the past, Frank might have secretly agreed with some of their ideas. Now he felt only shame at the thought. We should cancel today's tour, Creval suggested. No, Frank said firmly. We will not let them scare us, but I will call for more security officers to join us. Frank used his communicator to request 4 more officers. Then he went up to meet Ambassador Zuckathar and the rest of the delegation. He explained the situation honestly. I'm sorry this has happened, Frank said, but I promise you will be safe. My team and I will make sure of it. Ambassador Zuckathar studied Frank's face. You feel responsible for the actions of these humans. Yes, Frank admitted. In a way I do. Their kind of thinking is not so different from how I used to think. I never would have made threats, but I didn't welcome aliens either. And now? The ambassador asked. Frank thought for a moment. Now I see that was wrong. The galaxy is too big for any species to face it alone. We need each other. The ambassador's scales shifted to a warm golden color. You have changed much in a short time, Officer Miller. That day's tour was of the colony's cultural district. Museums, theaters, and art galleries filled the area. The delegation seemed especially interested in a museum that showed the history of human space exploration. Frank walked beside Ambassador Zuckathar, with the other officers spread out around the group. Your species went from basic flight to space. Travel in less than a century, Ambassador Zuckathar noted as they looked at a timeline display. That is very fast compared to most species. We tend to be impatient, Frank said with a small smile. It is both your strength and your weakness, the ambassador replied. You race forward so quickly that sometimes you trip over yourselves. As they moved toward the exit, Frank noticed a man watching them. He wore a jacket with the Earth First symbol barely hidden on the inside. Frank signaled to the other officers who moved closer to the delegation. Outside the museum, a small crowd had gathered. Many held signs with Earth First slogans. Their faces showed anger. "Aliens go home," one man shouted. "Earth for humans," called another. Frank stepped in front of Ambassador Zikathar. "We should go back inside and leave through another exit," he said quietly. But before they could turn around, someone in the crowd threw a bottle. It flew through the air straight toward the ambassador. Without thinking, Frank jumped and caught it before it could hit the alien. The bottle broke in his hand, cutting his palm. The crowd went quiet for a moment, surprised by Frank's quick action. Then more bottles and rocks started flying. The other officers moved to protect the rest of the delegation. "This way," Frank called, leading the group back toward the museum entrance. His hand was bleeding, but he ignored the pain. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the noise of the crowd. "Stop this right now!" Frank turned to see Dr. Washington pushing through. The protesters. 6 security officers from the diplomatic center followed him. "Is this how we show the best of humanity?" Dr. Washington demanded of the crowd. "Is this how we prove we deserve a place among the stars?" Some of the protesters looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Others drifted away now that more security had arrived. Dr. Washington reached Frank and the delegation. "Ambassador Zakathar, I apologize for this incident." "No need, Dr. Washington," the ambassador replied. "Thanks to Officer Miller, no one was harmed." He looked at Frank's bleeding hand. Except, Officer Miller himself. Back at the diplomatic center, a medical team treated Frank's cut. It was deep but would heal. As a nurse wrapped a bandage around his hand, Dr. Washington and Ambassador Zakathar entered the room. "A brave action," Ambassador Zakathar said, looking at Frank's hand. "You put yourself at risk to protect me." Frank shrugged. "It's my job." "No," the ambassador said. "Your job was to call for backup or to get me to safety. You chose to place your body between me and danger. That goes beyond duty." Dr. Washington nodded. "He's right, Frank. You could have been seriously hurt." Frank looked down at his bandaged hand. "I didn't think about it. I just acted." Ambassador Zekathar's scales shifted to a deep purple color. "On my world, when one being saves another from harm, a special bond is formed. We call it Kasvir, those connected by the risk of blood." The ambassador held out one of his 4 hands. "You and I are now Kasvir, Frank Miller." Frank hesitated only a moment before taking the alien's hand. It felt cool and smooth against his skin. "In our culture," Ambassador Zakathar continued, "Kasvir means that I now consider you family. If you ever come to Arcturus, you will be welcomed as one of our own." Frank felt a strange emotion. For the first time, he saw the alien not as something foreign and different, but as a being capable of the same feelings humans had: gratitude, honor, connection. "Thank you, Ambassador," Frank said. "I would be honored to visit your world someday." Dr. Washington watched this exchange with a satisfied expression. Later, as they walked out of the medical room, he placed his hand on Frank's shoulder. "You've come a long way from that day when you arrested me," he said. Frank nodded. "I'm sorry again for that, sir." "Don't be," Dr. Washington replied. "Without that mistake, you wouldn't be where you are now. Sometimes our worst moments lead to our best changes." 6 months had passed since the Arcturus delegation's visit to New Washington Colony. The morning sun shone brightly on the new construction site in the center of the colony. A large crowd had gathered for the groundbreaking ceremony of the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center. Frank stood at the edge of the stage in his dress uniform. He was no longer just a regular police officer. After the incident with the Earth First protesters, Captain Bennett had promoted him to lieutenant. Now he was the head of the newly formed Interspecies Relations Unit within the New Washington Police Department. Frank watched as Ambassador Zakathar approached the podium. The Arcturian's scales glowed a bright gold color in the sunlight. "People of New Washington Colony, people of Earth, and friends from across the galaxy," Ambassador Zakathar began. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in our shared story. The Galactic Council has chosen New Washington as the site for the first Interspecies Cultural Exchange Center on a human colony. The crowd cheered. Frank saw humans and aliens standing side by side, all celebrating together. It was a sight that would have made him uncomfortable 6 months ago. Now it filled him with hope. This decision was not made lightly. Ambassador Zakathar continued. Many factors were considered, but what convinced the council most was not the colony's resources or location. It was the people of New Washington, who demonstrated their ability to grow and change. The ambassador's eyes found Frank in the crowd. One story in particular showed us that humans are ready for deeper integration into galactic society. It is the story of an officer who once acted on old prejudices, but who later risked his own safety to protect a being very different from himself. Frank felt his face grow warm as many in the crowd turned to look at him. Dr. Washington, standing near the front, gave him an encouraging nod. After the ambassador finished speaking, other officials took turns at the podium. Frank listened as they described plans for the exchange center. It would include meeting halls, research facilities, living quarters for visiting aliens, and cultural spaces where different species could share their art, music, and traditions. When the speeches ended, Frank joined the group of officials near the construction site. Each person would turn a symbolic shovel of dirt to mark the beginning of the project. Lieutenant Miller, Dr. Washington called, motioning Frank forward. You should be part of this. Frank hesitated. I'm just security, sir. You're much more than that, Dr. Washington replied. This center might not be happening without you. Frank took his place in line. When his turn came, he pushed the ceremonial shovel into the ground and lifted a scoop of earth. As he did, he remembered the day he had arrested Dr. Washington. How different things had been then. How different he had been. After the ceremony, a reception was held in the colony's main plaza. Humans and aliens mingled freely, sharing food and conversation. Frank stood at the edge of the gathering watching. You seem deep in thought, Lieutenant, a familiar voice said. Frank turned to see Dr. Washington approaching, a drink in his hand. Just thinking about how much has changed, sir, Frank replied. Dr. Washington nodded. For the colony or for you? Both, I guess, Frank said. He looked out at the crowd again. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this was possible. So many different species all getting along. Not perfectly, Dr. Washington pointed out. There are still Earth First protesters on the edge of the plaza. There are still misunderstandings and conflicts. But we're trying. That's what matters. Frank nodded. He had noticed the small group of protesters. They were being monitored by his officers, but allowed to express their views peacefully. Change takes time. Speaking of change, Dr. Washington said, I have a proposition for you. The Exchange Center will need a security director once it's built. Someone who understands both human and alien concerns. Someone who has shown they can put aside prejudice and see beings for who they are, not what they look like. Frank looked at Dr. Washington in surprise. Are you offering me the job? I am, Dr. Washington confirmed. You would need training, of course. 6 months on Earth at the Diplomatic Security Academy, then another 6 months visiting different alien worlds to learn their security protocols and cultural norms. Frank's mind raced. Leave New Washington? Visit alien worlds? The idea would have terrified him before. Now it excited him. One of those worlds would be Arcturus, Dr. Washington added. Ambassador Zakathar specifically requested that you spend time there. He wants to introduce his Kazavir to his family. Frank smiled at that. Since the incident, he and Ambassador Zakathar had formed a genuine friendship. They exchanged messages regularly, and Frank had been learning about Arcturian culture and language. I would be honored to accept the position, sir, Frank said. Dr. Washington held out his hand, and Frank shook it. Excellent. You'll begin your training next month. Across the plaza, Frank saw Ambassador Zakathar watching them. The Arcturian raised all 4 hands in a traditional blessing gesture. Frank returned the gesture, now familiar with its meaning. Later, that evening, Frank stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the colony. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in gold and orange. In the distance, he could see the construction site where soon the exchange center would rise. His communicator beeped with a message. It was from Captain Bennett. "Congratulations on the new position, Lieutenant. You've come a long way from that day you brought in Dr. Washington. Proud of you." Frank smiled as he typed his reply. "Thank you, Captain. I would never have made this journey without that mistake. Sometimes our worst moments lead to our best changes." He put the communicator away and continued looking out at the colony. New Washington was changing, growing, becoming something new. Just as he was. In the night sky above, stars began to appear one by one. Somewhere out there was Arcturus and Rigel and Tau Ceti, and hundreds of other worlds with beings very different from humans, yet alike in so many important ways. Soon, Frank would see those worlds for himself. He thought about the man he had been 6 months ago, afraid of differences, suspicious of anything unfamiliar, locked in old ways of thinking. That man would never have imagined standing where Frank stood now, looking forward to a future among the stars. Dr. Washington had told him once that the galaxy was watching humanity, wondering if humans could overcome their worst impulses. Frank hadn't understood then. Now he did. The question wasn't just about humanity as a species. It was about each individual human making a choice to grow, to learn, to become better than they had been. Frank had made his choice, and as he looked up at the stars that would soon be his destinations, he hoped others would make the same choice too.